I'm here to talk about why you suck. Who am I? My name is Gene Branfield. I am a senior systems security engineer from Tenacity Solutions. What do? I do contracting, mostly federal government stuff, security stuff. I do consulting, system evaluations, and more along the lines of auditing. And when they let me out of the gate, I can do some penetration mail user testing. And yes, I read my slides. People tell me it's a bad habit, but if I didn't think it was important, I wouldn't have wrote it there in the first place. So I'll do that from time to time. What's this talk about? Security, me, you, hackers, defenders, why we suck. Tonight's information, pardon me, thoughts about information security in the world and how to make it better. Oh, by the way, the thoughts, opinions, rants contained in this presentation I'm about to give are those of the speaker, which is me, and not necessarily the opinions, thoughts, and rants of Tenacity Solutions Incorporated or any of its customers and employees, unless, of course, you like this talk, in which case they're all for it.
And you're not our lawyer.
I am not your lawyer. I am not a lawyer. So where did this talk come from? Well, I was sitting at ShmooCon and I'm listening to Bruce Potter rant on about how things are still screwed up after all these years of hacks and HackerCons and things like that. And I started to think about why. Why does it seem like developers don't know any better, that the executives don't care? It's like nobody's told them. And I'm thinking, okay, what's the real problem here? Whose fault is this? And so I'm looking around. I'm looking around at this place. This is a hacker convention. How many CEOs are in the room? One? Okay. How about, you're the first one that ever raised your hand. How about that don't own a small security company?
That's an assumption.
Okay. Do you know what a buffer overflow is?
Well, yes.
Okay, then you're rare. How many lead developers are here that aren't in the small security? Do you have secure development practices? There's nobody here to answer that question. So who is in the room? We got hackers. Who do we talk to before, after, and during the con? Hackers. Who reads and understands the articles? Hackers. How's the rest of the world supposed to acquire this information? How are we really helping? When you think about it, we have the knowledge, experience, and talent to fix those things that are wrong with the internet. We stand around on the sidelines screaming, "You're doing it wrong!" We know the answers, we wait for people to screw up, and then we stand there and laugh at them. So you think about it, whose fault is it for the major security flaws? Your fault. You all fail. Well, you're thinking, wait a minute, what the fuck? That don't make no sense. You're like, how is it my fault? I've told them they won't listen. We've had countless hacks. We've had countless cons. How else am I supposed to tell them? What the hell else am I supposed to do? Well, you're doing it wrong. And I don't know what this guy's doing, but he's definitely doing it wrong. Okay, so, but you're like, do you read the Bible, Ringo? One of the things that I'm talking about here is this little part in the Bible called Acts chapter 2, verses 9 through 11. Now, I'm not a Bible thumper. If I was going to give an analogy using, something from Star Wars, I wouldn't expect somebody in the room to stand up and say, Jedis aren't real, man. So cut me a break, just let me out. Pentecost. It's talking about how the apostles received the gift of tongues. Now, in this little wonderful miracle that they had here, they received the gift of the Holy Spirit. And when they went out and started talking to people, regardless of where those people were from, Samaria, where have you, they could understand the apostles even though the apostles weren't speaking their language. They could just understand them. So you see in this ridiculously successful public relations trick, it spread Christianity far and wide, of course, with the help of the Roman Empire and a little bit of genocide. But we don't talk about that. So what's the point of that? So we're speaking to the choir. Similar to those early Christian prophets, we actually have to go out and interact with those various people of strange and heathen cultures like business professionals, developers, and users if we have to. We have to learn to speak their language, communicate with them in terms that they understand rather than expecting them to use terms that we understand or listen to our lingo. So what are you talking about? Go ye all into the world, preach the good news to every culture. Sounds like a good idea, right? But of course, most of the early Christian prophets ended up dying in rather heinous methodologies, but that, yeah, including their boss, the guy who thought it was a good idea in the first place. Yeah. But that wouldn't happen today, would it? So where are we going from here? We're going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about our various focus groups, business guys, developers, end users. We're going to talk about the security professional and my own personal thoughts on world domination. It's going to be a good talk. So we'll start with the definition of culture. Got 3 different definitions here for one word. The first one's from Webster's, which is an American dictionary. Second one's from Cambridge, which is a British dictionary. And the third one's from the internet, because if it's on the internet, it has to be right. So they're the same word, but 3 different definitions. They sort of talk about the same thing, but slightly differently. You notice I said it was a British dictionary, the Cambridge one, because I know that because I dealt with a guy one time. I went to the morning meeting. They said, this is Darren. He's from England, and he's going to be working with us. And so I was the guy who ran the lab today, so I had to go talk to him, figure out what he wanted. So I walked in there and said, so you're the new British guy. He says, no, I'm not the British guy. I'm the British guy. There's a T in there. There's no D. B-R-I-T-I-S-H. You Americans always mispronouncing it. I said, really? He said, yes. I said, how do you spell pompous? He was cool about it. He said, touche. Yeah, he and I were good friends after that. He's a really smart guy. So talking about practical culture, how does this happen? How does this interact with actual real life situations? I was in the Air Force. I was a Korean linguist, which means they sent me to language school for a year, and I learned Korean there, and then they sent me to another military school for 6 months, and then they finally sent me to Korea. So I'm on the plane, I'm like going, this is going to be great. I've been spending a year and a half in training. I've never actually talked to a real Korean person in Korea. This is going to be great. I'm going to be so macho when I get off the plane. I'm going to have it. So I get off the plane in Seoul Airport. You walk out into the terminal, and everything's in English. You're like, what the hell? Who did this? This sucks. So I go downstairs. I get in a cab, and I'm like, okay, take me. And in Korean, I tell the cab driver, take me to Osan Air Force Base. And he says, huh? And so I say it slower and louder in Korean. Please take me to Osan Air Force Base. He looks at me and he says, what? So I say it even slower, even louder. Please take me. And he says, speak English. So there goes my ego rolling onto the floor. And I'm like, oh, Christ, that sucks. But what I didn't realize is that what they teach you in language school is formal methodology. If you're teaching somebody to speak English, you say, hello, how are you today, sir? But when you talk to somebody, one of your friends, they come up and say, hey, what's up? Now, if you learn that the greeting is, hello, how are you today, sir? And somebody says, what's up to you? You have no friggin' idea what the hell they're talking about. So you had to learn the colloquial stuff. You had to learn the slang. And you actually had to learn unspoken understandings that exist between people when they speak, which is called culture. Male to female, old to young, proper and improper. It happens in Asia. It happens in America. You just don't realize you're using it because you do it every day. So I was climbing Old Crag Mountain, which is a mountain in Virginia. My fiance said, oh, we'll just do this on a day trip. It'll be fun. It's a really easy climb. And 4 hours later, it's reached the point of no return, and I'm dragging her ass up a sheer rock face, and I was pissed off about that. But finally got to the top, and we're sitting there enjoying the beautiful view that we earned. And out of the woods come these three guys, and they're all scraggly. They've obviously been hiking for several days. They're just out doing their stuff. And they come up, they're dirty, they smell bad, and they're just like scraggly, like real mountain men looking dudes. And they walk up to the precipice, and one of them says, wow, this is so pretty. Now, just by the way he said that, you know so much about that guy, because that's the culture that you're used to dealing with. It's like unspoken stuff that you don't even realize is going on. Another experience that you'll deal with culture, here's the chopsticks and the rice story. I was there for Korea for about 6 months when somebody transferred into my unit, and he used to be a Mormon missionary. So he was really ingrained in the culture for like years and years and years. So I took him to my favorite Korean food restaurant downtown. And I'm sitting there talking away with him, and I get thirsty. I got a big bottle of beer right there, so I take my chopsticks and I stick them in the rice like that, and I grab my beer, and he screams at me, what the hell are you doing? What I didn't realize, what nobody told me was, there's a ceremony for, it's Chuseok. It's a yearly celebration, sort of similar to Thanksgiving, where everybody goes back home, but unlike Thanksgiving, it's like where they celebrate the memories of their ancestors. And the culmination of the ceremony is when they take this small bowl of rice and they take this chopsticks and they stick it in the chopsticks and they leave it on their front doorstep. It's a ceremony to honor the dead, and if you ever do that in any other circumstance, it's extraordinarily rude. It's kind of like smacking somebody in the face kind of rude. I'd been doing this for 6 months. I've been going to the same Korean restaurant for 6 months, and nobody bothered to tell me that doing this in my rice was really rude. So you're like, why? Because I'm a gringo, because I'm a Yangnam, because I'm a Westerner, I wouldn't understand. So they didn't bother to explain it to me. Similar to that, when you go talk to your business guy, or you go talk to your developer, you're a security guy, you don't understand what the business is. So they're not going to bother to explain it to you. This is why you need to learn their lingo. This is not just in Asia, this is in the boardroom. So understanding culture means you understand their motivations, objections, fears, uncertainty, and doubts. We had FUD, now we got MOFUD. Understanding the MOFUD leads to enhanced communications, increased victory, and decreased fail. So we're going to talk about our different cultures. Culture of the business professional is kind of like a nobility philosopher kind of guy. The culture of the development guys are kind of like barbarians. Culture of the end users, they're peasants. We don't give a shit about those guys. And each culture is different. Thank you. Each culture is different, and they have different MOFUD. So it begs the question, if the business guys are philosophers, developers are barbarians, end users are peasants, what does that mean to the security guy? Well, it's close. We are the knights. We are the knights who say, fail! So we'll talk about our business professionals. Who are they? The CFO, CEO, CXO. For PMs, management, why philosophers? They're in charge, they get the money, the power, they make decisions based on academics, numbers, training, experience. They rarely seek the counsel from those whom their decisions affect. And what's their MOFUD? They want to make themselves look good, get the promotion, get the company or organization toward profitability, because if the business goes out of business, then everybody loses their job. And they make decisions based on getting a bonus or getting fired. Now, if you had every decision you made is the difference between getting a bonus or getting fired, you'd take a little bit longer to make decisions. I know I would. So you must learn their language and their culture so you may win favor upon your arguments and ideas. If you're like, wait a minute, why am I learning their culture? Security is my job. They need to come and talk to me because I'm the one who understands it. They don't have a freaking clue. Well, there are several reasons why the preceding argument is invalid. The lesser of those reasons being, computer stuff is really hard for them. You start talking about DNS resolution and they fade off, start thinking about golf or jujubes or whatever the hell it is they're thinking about rather than you. Reason number two is you're a geek. And nobody listens to geeks for the preceding reasons, like the chopsticks and the rice you wouldn't understand, so why the hell should they listen to you? Not only that, but because you're a geek, you tend to overreact to security threats. Really, sometimes we have a tendency to overreact. Yes. There was some people are like, that's awesome. People are like, oh, poor kitty. So we have to learn their language seriously because they're the decision makers. They're the nobility. They have the money and the power. We don't. We need influencing their decisions, swaying them one way or the other because they're going to buy a server. Either they buy the one that we asked them to buy or they're going to buy the one that the last guy that took them to lunch told them to buy. And really, when the cards are down and all hell breaks loose and the system goes down, they're not going to call Mr. Decision Maker money spending guy. They're going to call you. And they're going to wake you up at 3 in the morning and make you come to work. So where the hell is the important decision-making guy when you're doing that? He's not there. He's off with somebody who might be his wife. So here's how we suck. We're completely outside the decision-making process. We're viewing things from a security perspective, vice a business perspective. We don't understand their lingo. We don't know their MOFUD. It's a completely different culture from ours. So what do we do for that? We keep the MOFUD in mind. Remember that the performance of the system is directly, sorry, I've had several beers. The performance of the systems directly reflect on that decision maker's performance itself. Sometimes the compensation is tied to his decision. Remember the bonuses? We'll talk more about bonuses. That's pretty interesting. Okay, the risks a C whatever O is willing to take are sometimes tied to financial rewards, and therefore it's a good idea to start tuning your arguments, including business type stuff. For example, metrics. There's a book by Andrew Jackwith called Security Metrics. The largest chapter, and it talks about presenting business types with metrics that are specific to security and how to get your ideas across to them in a way they understand. The largest chapter in that book is on creating charts and presentations because business guys love pretty pictures only if that pretty picture says something to them. For example, this particular picture here is outlining Napoleon's march into Moscow and his subsequent retreat. Now you can see the big swath here is him going in, him landing in Moscow, and him coming back out. Now you can see that in a very brief description of what this picture is, you can understand everything you need to know about how he failed and how decimating it was. I mean, look at this big line here and look at this little bitty line there. That's a pretty powerful graphic. It's often cited as one of the best graphics in history because it tells you everything you need to know really quick. This is what a business guy is looking for when it comes to making decisions. What else do you do? Statistics. Numbers don't lie, but liars use numbers. So there's a doctor, a lawyer, an electrician, an engineer, and a statistician that go in for a job interview. Sit the doctor down, and they ask him, what's 2 plus 2? He says, my diagnosis is it's 4. Sit the lawyer down, what's 2 plus 2? Well, based on the evidence, I'd say it's 4. Sit an engineer down, what's 2 plus 2? He says, any moron can see it's 4. They sit a statistician down, they say, what's 2 plus 2? And he's like, well, what do you want it to be? Statistics are a way of using numbers to tell a story, and getting your point across using the numbers is a very powerful tool to use. For example, I ginned up a bunch of access control lists, and I sent them down to the router guys. I said, please apply these to your external routers because we're getting pwned. And they screamed bloody murder. It says, these access lists suck. And I knew they didn't suck because I put them up in my own lab. They were good. And they said they increase router CPU utilization by 20%, and it's not worth putting them on there. The resource hit is too high. So I asked to see their numbers, and through hemming and hawing and various pounding on doors and showing up at inappropriate times, I finally ended up with the numbers. And they told the truth. It increased the router CPU utilization by 20%. It took it from 10% utilization to 12% utilization. Somehow, I think we're going to be okay. That's how you use numbers to win an argument. Finance, even stronger arguments are made using dollars and cents. Finance for non-financial managers, Gene Silicelli, I don't know how to pronounce his name, wrote a book. It's basically designed for people who don't know much about finance to learn about finance. Cash is king. He explains why cash is king, explains why it's okay sometimes for businesses not to pay their bills on time, and goes into a whole bunch of other things. It doesn't say that you guys should not pay your bills on time. I wouldn't mean to. I'm not your lawyer, but pay your bills on time. Other things it talks about, money talks. You'll learn about why money talks from this book about finance for non-financial managers. It's good. And risk. We can't talk about business guys without talking about risk. Risk is how they make all their decisions. What's the risk? The risk of this, the risk of that. Drove me bonkers until I finally started looking into it. The official definition is right here, probability of loss in a firm's operations, etc. Business risk plus financial risk equals total corporate risk. The handling of risk determines your job goodness when you're a CEO. Of course, you're all familiar with the CISSP definition of risk. Asset value times exposure factor equals single loss expectancy times annual rate of occurrence equals annual loss expectancy, or ALE. And when you see some of the countermeasures that people put in place, you can tell they were using a lot of ALE. Because, for example, you're not going to spend $500,000 protecting a $100 asset. That's the long and short of how the CISSP. Personally, I like my definition of risk is, do I have to put down my beer and turn off my hockey game and come to work to deal with some bullshit decision because your broken-ass system is not working now? That's my personal definition of it. So, problem with risk. At some level, it's subjective. You have to guess. In all of those risk models, there's a guessed number that somebody puts in there that everybody just generally sort of agrees on. The recent economic crisis in the housing market came because of a lot of really serious math went to prove that somebody's guess was probably right. And economists have arguments with me around how it's not true and what I'm saying is not. But look, the way I'm saying, if you build a golden palace on a base of dog shit, eventually it's going to sink into the dog shit because it's not cool enough to hold it up. But there's a lot of nebulous factors of risk, especially when applied to information security. For example, this guy, Robert Hansen. He was a mole at the FBI. He was arrested about a decade ago. He exposed the existence of a covert tunnel that they were creating under the Soviet Union, which cost hundreds of millions of dollars to complete. Now, when the tunnel was completed, the intelligence was worthless from day one, and the misinformation was fed into the U.S. intelligence community. What's the annual loss expectancy associated with that? Would you include the hundreds of millions of dollars it took to complete a worthless tunnel? Would you include the man-hours and intelligence value that you placed in this worthless information? How about the lives that were spent at trying to exploit this intelligence? Some interesting questions that I have about risk, people. Nobody can seem to answer that. To turn it around to a more corporate organization, it's being first to market equals buttloads of cash. We will cover that later. Millions of dollars is spent in initial development. Let's say in Company A. Company A spends millions of dollars in initial development. 1 month before product release, someone hacks into the company and steals the idea and beats that company to market. Company B beats Company A to market. What's the annual loss expectancy there? Would you include the 100%? Or would you take the profits you made in being late to market based on the profits that they made being the first to market? Why does the iPod rule and the Zune sucks? Well, or it could be that the most compelling argument I've heard is, well, the Zune's just not the iPod. What if the Zune showed up first? Well, the iPod's not the Zune either. How much money did Microsoft lose on that? Anybody know? Interesting questions. An example of success is like, okay, Gene, you're sitting up here spewing a lot of business crap at me. How has this ever worked? Well, in early 2000, I was working at the Air National Guard Network Operations Security Center. Every state has at least one Air National Guard base. Every territory has at least one. They only have one network operations and security center, and I was a security guy there, so I was busy. Early 2000, we get hit with a lot of worms disguised as .zip emails. And the answer to that is, of course, to block all .zips at the SMTP gateway. Well, this caused mass consternation, and the peasants revolted. You can't block .zip at my SMTP gateway. You're affecting my mission and hurting my readiness. Now, if you ever work on a DoD contract, if you do something that they find even slightly unpleasant, they will tell you that you're affecting their mission. It's sometimes bullshit, sometimes not. This time it was bullshit. They said the updated virus signatures at the SMTP gateway will stop all these attacks so we don't have to worry about them. Now, I made the argument, it's like, look, you realize you changed 2 bits of information in that, virus, then it's going to blow right through the virus detection. Nope, nope, nope. Okay, they didn't understand what 2 bits of information. They had good faith in their virus detection stuff. And pretty much for about 2 months, 3 months, every Friday at about 3:30 to 4:30 p.m., I'd get the call that one of these units had a virus in it. Never happens at Monday at 8:30. It always happens at Friday at 3:30. That always pissed me off. So peasants won, security lost, repeat above scenario. So I got pissed, and I started looking into numbers, and I started figuring this whole thing out. And I went to the boss. I said, look, Colonel, your organization is a 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year organization. One worm breakout causes 3 days of downtime. That's speaking directly to his mission readiness. You're losing training opportunities. You only have these guys for 1 weekend a month, and this entire weekend was lost to a virus. Again, speaking to mission readiness. Think about the training dollars you've wasted. Now I'm talking to his finances. Say, do you realize that if we simply sent out email guidance that said, if you're going to send a zip file from person A to person B, person A renames .zip to .piz, and I showed him how to do it. It'd take about 6 seconds. Send it to there and include in the email instructions to rename the file back when the receiver gets it. People can do that. Viruses can't. We can block .zip at the gateway and still complete the mission. Well, this was the actual look on his face. He had absolutely no idea that it was that simple. And I was like, oh my God. And so epic victory for me. There was a policy change at the Air National Guard that was later mimicked by the Air Force at large. I'd like to take credit for that, but it was an easy fix. Anybody could have thought of it. We sent a complete set of instructions to the peasants. They were minor bitching, but that's what peasants do. You schwack and get back in line. But it put me in a trusted advisor status with the boss. He now knew, by me addressing his needs, that I had his best interest in mind. I gave him pointed business reasons that he could use to justify his decisions to his boss and thus maintain his goodness. He made him look good, wise, proactive, and mission ready. Therefore, I addressed his needs, I addressed my needs, and I took care of his mofud, and we're all good. So you're like, okay, wait a minute. This business and finance stuff is boring as crap. Learning about business stuff interferes with my thirst for knowledge and technology. I can't be on the internet learning about everything if I'm studying business. Not only that, but you can't be a lead hacker by learning about finance. Well, get over yourself. If you've got a beer in front of you, you don't need to cry. Look, if you learn about TCP/IP, you learn about DNS, you learn how the internet works, you learn how to program, probably on your own. Learning these concepts and speaking this lingo is not that hard. You read a couple books, some of them are boring, sorry, but if you start speaking their lingo, they start paying attention to you, your life gets a whole hell of a lot easier. After I fixed that ANG problem, I didn't have to stay late every frickin' Friday for the next couple months. It was beautiful. So that's how you talk to the business guys. Developers, let's talk to those bastards. Who are they? I've had more than one beer, sorry. Programmers, system administrators, code monkeys, wire apes. Okay, why do we call them barbarians? Well, they're hired to do a very specific job, and they're very good at their specific job. They're not sometimes very socially acceptable to the nobility, so they like to keep their distance. Developers more likely to belong to a company or organization such as the SCA, which I can't remember that acronym now. Thank you, Society of Creative Anachronism, pardon me. Thus justifying sword ownership, and they're likely to come after me with that sword after this talk is over and me calling them barbarians. And I actually had somebody come up and complain to me that I didn't put developers in a good light, and I said, do you own a sword? He said, yes. I said, thank you. So, what's their MOFA? They want to build a system to requirements, make it work beautifully, go home, and not get called at 3 a.m. So we're more familiar with their language, but what about their MOFA? They're building a system, make it beautiful, get paid, go home. What do developers do? They build systems to requirements. What are the requirements from security? Be secure, use best practices, it's on SAN, it's on Google. Google's your friend, read the internet, dude, it's not that hard. All right? Well, anybody ever here work with Mutz? Ever hang out? Okay, Mutz Mattiaroni, developer of Backtrack. This guy is awesome. He teaches courses under offensive security. If you ever have the opportunity to go get the offensive security courses taught by Mutz, go do it. He's awesome. He's a great teacher. He breaks really complex, things down such that anybody can really understand them. And he's ADD. He's about this tall. He's about that thin, and he's ADD as hell. So he's running around the classroom doing this, and he's a lot of fun to watch. But during his courses, he was telling a story about how he was hired to do a pen test, and he broke into a system for a client. And they said, okay, you broke into the system, great, that's what we hired you to do. How do we fix it? And he said, I don't know. You guys didn't hire me to fix it. You hired me to break in. Pay me. But this is what we're doing to these guys. We're standing there. What is security? Jefe, what is security? So, what are those requirements? Do you have a security policy at your organization? Are those policy requirements written so that they can be understood by a barbarian? Who's responsible for doing that? Ever read Sarbanes-Oxley? Yeah. Ever read HIPAA? Yeah. Ever read NIST? Are those 853 is my favorite. Think those documents were written by developers or for developers? No, they were written by lawyers and bureaucrats for lawyers and bureaucrats so they can be vague enough to apply to anything but specific enough to nail your ass to the wall when they want to get in your shit. So here's you're welcome. Here's an excerpt from HIPAA. The thing I liked about HIPAA is it's a 49-page document. The requirements don't get started until page 46. And then they're all written like this. Audit controls. Implement hardware, software, and/or procedural mechanism that record and examine the activity in information systems that contain or use electronically protected health information. Okay, developer, you need to implement my audit control here. It's like, what the hell is that? Does that mean if I see Rocky sitting on a computer, say, okay, it's Wednesday at 3 o'clock, as Rocky is over there using a ciphering or something? Does that meet that requirement? By the letter of the law, it might. Do you think that's what they had in mind? I don't think so. NIST 853, this is wonderful stuff. See all these brackets? There are brackets inside of brackets inside of brackets over here. And all those say, assignment, organization defined time period, assignment, organization defined delay algorithm. You give a developer, you say, you have to be compliant with 853. You give him this, he's like, what am I supposed to do here? It's like, well, figure it out. No, we're not helping these guys. This is a problem. This is how we suck. We are leaving these guys out to dry. We tell them to be secure, but we give them no requirements to create to. We need to interpret these security policies. We need to translate this bogus jargon bullshit into actionable requirements. We need to help implement these policies. Security people need to do this. You, me, everybody. We need to help these guys out, quite frankly. And here's the biggest problem. If you take nothing away from this talk, take this away from the talk. Schedule pays better than security. If they have a choice to make between getting the product out on time and being secure with it, they will get the product out on time and security be damned. Why? Second bullet there, don't worry, be crappy by Kai Kowalski. Being first to market with a new idea means the difference between you owning a Ferrari or a BMW. This is what the business guys are saying. You've got a good idea, get it out there. It doesn't matter if it sucks. Everybody's going to love it immediately. So why is this scary? Well, because we've got this development philosophy going on out there, that the system has two sets of requirements, functional requirements and security requirements, and this is absolute bullshit. A system has system requirements, and those are the union of the set of functional and security requirements. Technically, you shouldn't begin development without a full set of requirements, but more often than not, this is not the case, as we all well know. So, why is this a big problem? Software is everywhere. Read the book Economics by David Rice. It will scare the ever-loving hell out of you, because he's talking about the security industry right now as being similar to the early automobile and railroad industry. In the early automobile and railroad industry, people would get killed in car wrecks all the time and say, well, it's not our fault. It was bad driving that caused the wreck. Railroad people be out on a train ride somewhere and the bridge underneath them would collapse. Well, that's not the railroad problem. The guy who built the bridge is at fault for that. There's certain things about it that are right, but most of it's wrong. Government regulations began only after major disasters occurred. This is a big problem for us because do we really want the government involved after a major disaster happens in our industry? I don't think we do. But they did just do They did just do a recent, the 50th anniversary of the automobile safety regulations. They took a 59 Chevy Bel Air and did a head-on crash with a 2009 Chevy Impala. Now, the Chevy Impala is much lighter, much smaller than the Bel Air, but the Chevy Impala just eviscerated the Bel Air. The Chevy Impala driver would have gotten up with a minor knee injury. The Bel Air guy would have been destroyed immediately. It's a real, go YouTube it. It's a really cool video. So how do we deal with this problem and not suck? Well, we write a security policy. We make standards automatic and mandatory. We have to give developers something to start with. For example, Microsoft boxes. You have to build, some people out there say, well, we'll just have a standard server build. Okay, is this server a domain controller, an email server? What? No, it's a standard server build. No, fail. There's different security that you have to apply to a domain controller than you have to apply to an email server, than you have to apply to a file server. Why not have 3 different builds? Right? You're just going to ghost them. Who gives a damn? Okay, build a system of rewards. Oracle and Microsoft have currently utilized this system and act upon that system positively and negatively. You've noticed over the past couple of years, Microsoft's gotten dramatically better at securing their software. And I was listening to the Chief Information Officer at Oracle give a talk one time, and she was relating the story about how they put these secure development practices out to everyone, and they made department heads responsible for making sure that those get applied in their various development departments. Well, of course, they released Unbreakable Oracle, and it was very breakable, so they traced this one vulnerability back to this one department head who had not gone out and enforced the standards. Well, he didn't get fired, but he did not get a bonus. Bonuses are half somebody's salary in some of these cases. Those big Wall Street gurus, they make $300,000 a year. $150,000 of that might be bonus. I know a guy who works for Oracle. He makes a lot of bonus. If this guy gets no bonus, he's hurting. That's a good way to enforce this thing. They actually made it, some of these companies are actually making it part of the employee description now, that you will follow secure computing practices. So you have to enforce these standards even among your small development teams out there, because quite frankly, if the logon to your domain controller is administrator and the password is password, that's not Microsoft's fault. And if Scott Tiger can log on to your Oracle, that's not Oracle's fault. So, how not to suck at security? Our policy is written, let's say we've got enforcement in place. How does your policy get evaluated? How do you know that you're doing it right? Well, let's talk about some scenarios here. Let's say you're performing a security evaluation on the network and notice that all the machines are vulnerable to the latest Microsoft RPC thing. Tangent question, do you pwn all those boxes? Why? What are you going to do with 250 shells on the same weak network? It's kind of like throwing rocks at the blind kid, isn't it? I mean, seriously, you pwn one maybe and do a screenshot, say, okay, look, I pwned your box, this is the problem with this thing. So anyway, you inform the organization about the flaw. The organization patches all their machines and schedules another scan. Is that adequate mitigation? Fuck no. Why the hell would that be okay? Fail. The true vulnerability is in the patch management system. How did you get there with your scanning software and find this RPC vulnerability out there and the machines weren't patched? What's their patch management system? How come this is a problem in the first place? Scenario number 2, you're performing a security evaluation on an organization and you notice a suddenly new, very vulnerable system is exposed to the internet. Let's say you pop that box and gain access to the organization's corporate network. The organization says, oh, that was a new development box out there. Bob is just doing some new stuff that we asked him to do. He does that sometimes. So they remove the box from the network and everything's fine. Is that an adequate mitigation? Oh, fuck that. What the hell is Bob doing with your boxes on the internet? Seriously, I mean, where's your configuration management policy? If Bob did that, then Bob probably put a web server over here that's got anonymous FTP running. What the hell? You need to establish a configuration management policy and stick to it, because the security guy gets blamed if developers do something fucked up. Because they're not going after the developers if there's a hacker on your network because the developer put a messed up box out there. In that book, Security Metrics, he tells the story of a guy who they had no configuration management on this this internet banking network. And the developer put up something, that's what follows standard procedures. You develop it, put it on the development box. If it runs fine on the development box, you move it to production. If it runs fine on production, you go home, you're done. Well, about 4 hours after this guy went home, the thing crashed and went down for 11 days. An internet banking company had their servers offline for 11 days. And so they're scrambling around trying to figure out what the hell went on. And who got blamed? The security guy. The chief information officer was blamed because he said, look, we've spent all this money on firewalls, we've spent all this money on alert servers, and nothing's coming up, nothing's getting picked up, and our server's obviously down, somebody's obviously DOSing us, and your system isn't able to find it. So while that guy was updating his resume and getting ready to leave town, they eventually went back through the logs and figured out the developer had done this. But This is how this configuration management policy can really save your ass. It's a good thing to invest in. And the sad truth is, if you go down to the bookstore and look at the computer section, how many books are you going to find on patch management? 0. How many are you going to find on configuration management? How many are you going to find on hacking? More than 2, right? What's more cost effective? Paying for a penetration test or spending the time and effort to implement a patch management and configuration management solution? I really don't like this slide because I really like pen testing. And this is not to say that pen testing gets to go away. Absolutely not. You need to do it, but you also need to do your configuration management and patch management. You're evaluating a system in a control gate, and you notice a significant design flaw. You recommend a mitigation to that design flaw, as well as recommend the developer reaccomplish the control gate. The developer steps up and he says that the suggested mitigation would cause an unacceptable schedule slip. Remember, schedule paying more than security? So that they do not perceive the flaw to be significant and that they will accept the risk for the organization and proceed on the original schedule. Is this an adequate mitigation? Fuck no. If you're taking the developer's word for accepting responsibility for the organization, the CFO is going to put his foot directly in your butt because the developer is not one to accept risk on behalf of the organization. That's the CXO's job. He said get him to put it in writing, hack the box, and then get him fired. But it's not the developer's job to interpret security requirements. That's your job. You're the security guy, and if the developer doesn't understand the security requirements, then the security person has failed. So what now? We've been talking for a while. We've influenced the decisions of the noble philosopher. We've influenced the behavior of the barbarian. We talked about various ways that we suck and how not to suck and get better. What do we do next? Well, remember how the Greeks conquered Troy? They shoved a bunch of their buddies in a horse and oh, by the way, the Trojan horse was actually Greek. Just pointing that out. But they shoved a bunch of the buddies in a horse, the lights went off, they got out of the horse, opened the gates, and they sacked the city. Number 1 killer of all mankind, disease, heart disease, kidney, cancer. It starts from the inside out, and you don't realize there's a problem until it's too late. Because people will buy guns, guards, and gates, but they'll forget to take their medicine. So what am I getting at? Well, what if all the major C whatever O's of these big companies were actually hackers? What if the lead developers in these major corporations were hackers? What if we sent hackers and security people into the world disguised as business types, and they made the hard decisions that avoided eventual internet global disaster? Well, who should do that? What about you? Somebody's like, oh, fuck no, I don't want to do that shit. Are you kidding me? Say, wait a minute. So go forth amongst the heathens and speak the truth. I mean, you can get an MBA taken care of in 18 to 24 months and ask any CEO, it's good to be the king. Heavy lifting. I'm sorry? The MBA removes your brain. Well, it's your job to keep your brain, young Skywalker. Use the Force. I used a Jedi reference. That's cool. Multiple online development courses exist out there. It's college and non-college-based training. Think about the crises we can avert if it was hackers making those big decisions that would eventually avert global internet disaster. So, education tangent, because several people have brought this up. Formal versus self-taught. I prefer formal. Self-taught has a lot of good things to it, and most self-taught people are actually smarter than the formal, or at least more experienced than the formal guys. But you can't put Leet Hackzor on a resume and get a job, unless you're Bruce Potter or Dan Kaminsky or Adrian Crenshaw or something like that. And no education is ever wasted. I mean, I started out as a Korean linguist, and I got to use it at a HackerCon. Are you shitting me? How cool is that? And math sucks. I used a lot of brain power to take care of my math problems, but people ask me, okay, yeah, but did it make a difference? And I'm like, well, yeah. Don't tell the math professor, but yeah, it made a difference. It really did. So, but you're like, okay, Gene, you've been talking my ear off for just about an hour now. What the hell are you talking about? Give me one example of how any of this crap is even remotely possible. Well, I got this. Google in China. What the hell am I talking about? Well, little history. 2005, there was a Chinese language interface for Google. 2006, China-based Google was launched. 2009, YouTube and others were censored by China, and Google stayed in China, and people said, oh man, Google sold out to the Chinese. They're putting money before human rights. They suck. Well, in 2010, January 2010, the Chinese government tried to hack into some Gmail accounts of some dissidents, and Google said, oh, the hell no, you don't. And so they went, and in March 2010, Google.cn rerouted queries through Hong Kong, producing uncensored results. So Chinese citizens, 1 point however many billion of them there are, suddenly got uncensored access to the 3 Ts, that being Tibet, Taiwan, and Tiananmen. Western governments, powerful Western governments, including the United States, have been trying to open up China for 61 years, and Google did it in 5. So now 1 point however many billion new free minds are able to read this information. How profound is that? What do you think they're going to do with this newfound freedom? Well, probably the same thing we ever do, browsing email, YouTube, Facebook, Warcraft, of course, Twitter, and, of course, everybody's favorite internet pastime. Say it with me. 1, 2, 3, porn. Thank you. This picture's called kitty porn. Oh, kitty porn. There's a T in there. There's no T. So what do you think? Ready to get out of your hacker con zone of comfort? Step out among the grubby, filthy masses? Start educating people about the right way to do things? Yes? Oh, fantastic. You're literally going to change the world. No? Well, that's why security people suck. And that is why you fail. Thank you, guys.